Okay, well, let's get started. So welcome everybody to another IOE Lunch and Learn. I'm Brian Denton. I'm the chair of the Department of Industrial and Operations Engineering. And we run these webinars, these lunch and learns every week with the goal of helping our students gain some essential skills, professional skills, and learn on a variety of topics. And this is the last one of the semester, and it's one I've been looking forward to. It's going to be, I think, a very exciting panel discussion. So I'm delighted to be able to kick this off. And I'll just set a couple of ground rules to begin with. We'll try to wrap up the panel discussion by 1 p.m. If we can, and we'll try to do that. And we'll also have a Q&A opportunity after that for those of you who can stay around a little bit longer. And so I encourage you to post questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom. And I'll also apologize in advance if we can't get to all of the questions, but please do post questions that you're interested in asking for any of the panelists. And the leader of the panel, Mike O'Connell, who we'll introduce in a moment, will moderate some of those questions for our guests. So with that, we'll get started. And the panel today is called Resilience, Teamwork, and Confidence, Life Skills from a Navy SEAL and a Professional Golfer. Those sound like very different walks of life, and they are, but there are some really interesting connections that you're going to learn about during the panel discussion. So just some quick introduction of our panelists. So Mike O'Connell is really the person who had the vision for this panel. Mike is an IOE alum. He's the founder of the founder and president of the Woodmark Group, a California-based winery. And he's very generous with his time. He served on many nonprofit boards, including our own department, IOE Advisory Board, where he chairs the committee that we have on education and professional development. So Mike helps me a lot as we're thinking about the different academic programs inside of IOE. And then two special guests that are joining us here that Mike has invited. One is Master Chief Terry Houin. Terry is a 26-year Navy SEAL veteran. He spent the majority of his career at the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, where he conducted over a dozen operational deployments all over the world. And during his time as a SEAL, he's held many positions that have given him a breadth of experience leading cross-functional teams, helping develop critical problem-solving skills, and developing some of the SEAL training curricula, which are really very well known. Some of you might have read some of the popular management leadership books that talk about how some of these training techniques and some of the knowledge from the SEALs can be used to transform business organizations too. And so Terry helps many people with developing some of those skills and using some of his vast knowledge in that area. And then Paul Stankowski is a professional golfer. He's in his 24th year in the PGA Tour. He has 2 tour victories, 30 top 10 tournament finishes, both of the tour victories in playoffs, and he plays on both the PGA Tour and the PGA Champions Tour. And with that brief introduction, I'll hand things over to Mike, so Mike can kick off the panel. Thanks,
Great,
Mike.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks to everyone who's joining us in this discussion. So as Brian mentioned, we invited Terry and Paul to talk with us today because they have a really unique mindset, and it's one that allows them to be the best in the world at what they do. More importantly, they're 2 of the most genuine and authentic people I know, and I think you're really going to like hearing from them. So Paul and Terry, thanks for giving us your time today to be a part of this discussion. Also,
glad to be here.
Also, Terry, thanks for your incredible service to our country.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I enjoyed just about every minute of it.
So the format for today's discussion is going to include 3 sections. In the first, on teamwork, we're primarily going to talk with Terry. And that's simply because being a pro golfer doesn't really lend itself to the team dynamics as much as being a SEAL. We'll then bring Paul in as we close on teamwork and transition into our second topic of resilience. The third topic is going to be on mindset, And then, as Brian said, we'll move to the Q&A. So with that, Terry, why don't we start with some background? And if we could start by you telling us, what are the SEAL teams?
That's a loaded question. So generally speaking, SEAL teams are a highly functioning, highly adaptive arm of our U.S. Department of Defense, specializing in critical missions that the general, bigger Army, bigger Marine Corps can't handle due to complexity, time restraints, size restraints, or you name it. So those could go anywhere from hostage mission or hostage rescue missions all the way down to advise and assist with some foreign governments. That kind of get the genesis of it.
Yep, I think it does. And roughly speaking, there are approximately 10 SEAL teams, maybe half on the East Coast, half on the West Coast. Separately, there's something called Development Group, and that's where you spent the majority of your career. What is different about the Development Group within the SEAL teams, separate from the other teams based on the East or West Coasts?
Yeah, so the really only difference is the ability to have more assets, to have a more highly refined mission set. So at Development Group, our primary mission is hostage rescue anywhere in the world. So we usually take 60 guys every year into our training class and then get them spread out between the squadrons. And then they're there as long as they possibly can stay or want to stay. It's unique in the fact that once you get through screening process and make it into one of the squadrons, barring a few exceptions, you can stay your entire career.
In Development Group. And the people who are selected for Development Group have generally years of experience on the teams prior to qualifying for it.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, so the process is you got to screen, go to BUDS, go through BUDS training program, which is 63 weeks long. Then from there, you'll serve typically 2 deployments or 5 years at a SEAL team. And then at the end of that, based off of your performance, your command master chief and your platoon chiefs will recommend you for screening. You'll go through a board, you'll go through a psych board, a medical board. And then if you get all of those and then you get selected, you'll go to green team, which is another 6 months of training.
So needless to say, it's challenging to make it to that level.
It's the unique part that sets us apart from every other special forces in the world, even in the U.S. government, is you've already got a baseline screening to go to BUDS. You've got a baseline screening to get your Trident. And then as you continue up through your career, by the time you get to Development Group, you've already got 6 years or so of experience. So the maturity level, the experience you're bringing to the table for the rest of the team is above and beyond anybody else.
And there have been some well-known movies made about the missions the Development Group have been on. Many people have probably seen Lone Survivor, and I think Development Group went in the back end of that to help Marcus Luttrell. Zero Dark 30 was well-known regarding the Bin Laden raid. And then Captain Phillips, I think, was the third one that the Development Group was involved in.
Yes.
If we can take Captain Phillips purely as an example to give the audience an understanding of what a mission is for Development Group, as an example, can you talk us through maybe the timeline and logistics on Captain Phillips of what the team may have experienced from the moment that they were notified, that they were being called to duty, to the time that they got on the ship, and give us kind of a perspective of what that experience might have been like?
So Captain Phillips, kind of right in our wheelhouse of what we're designed to do. So for those of you guys that haven't seen that, in April of 2009, Captain Phillips of the Maersk, Alabama commercial vessel was taken hostage in the Indian Ocean. We were notified. I had a small team somewhere in Africa. We were notified of the situation. Our squadron back home was notified of the situation, but at the time, the ship was too far from any asset other than the U.S. naval vessel. So we started planning, getting ready, and within a few hours, USG, the government, made the call we're going to rescue Captain Phillips. So once that notification went down, the squadron back home had a few hours to pack, get on the airplane, and start flying. I did the same thing with my team. We jumped in to the middle of the Indian Ocean on probably within 12 hours of getting the first notification of the issues going on. And then
now, if I could take a step back for a second. So there was a group in the United States that was going on with their regular lives. They got notified that they were going abroad. They had a very specific amount of time to get to the base, but once they got to the base, they had to be fully prepared with all of their equipment and come together probably pretty quickly with some plans. And then I assume they didn't go to like Dulles International Airport and check in first class on United, kick their feet up, turn on a movie and eat a warm cookie, right? That's probably not how they got there.
No, we've got, as part of our broader SOCOM package, we have assets dedicated for a national mission force like this. So once they were notified, airplanes flew in. So we have all of our airplanes, all of our gear ready to go. Part of our standard operating procedures, or what we call SOPs, is all of our gear for any of the missions that we're aligned to do while we're on standby is ready to go at a moment's notice in your locker, ready to go. Magazines loaded, guns loaded, batteries new. All you got to do is grab your bag and go.
In dealing with this level of uncertainty, it sounds like plans are being created, maybe on the airplane. There's, Captain Phillips, if anybody's seen the movie, Tom Hanks did an incredibly good job starring in this role. But the actions of what were going on surrounding Captain Phillips created a lot of uncertainty. So the teams involved in this were probably coming up with the best plan they could, dealing with a tremendous amount of uncertainty and really not knowing what the final plan would be until they arrived at the ship, I'm guessing. And part of what you do then is deal with that incredible uncertainty in your job.
Yeah, we try, if we got a mission like that, we've got about an 80% solution right off the bat that we roll with. And then we're prepared to react and change as the dynamic environment adapts to what's going on. So we're constantly updating our plan, making communications up and down the chain to let everybody know what's going on, because it's a very fluid environment with something like that.
And one of the parts of the story that I heard is that communications were very important on this mission. Yes. And that somebody from Washington, a non-SEAL, was assigned to this mission. And from what I heard, for example, the team, went in with parachutes into the ocean, and that civilian from DC was connected to one of the SEALs and had to jump out of the airplane with him. And just to give a scenario, and I'm going to put me in that position, I am not trying to jump out of airplanes. I'm guessing most communication experts are not. If you were to latch me up to somebody in the darkness at 30,000 feet and tell me to jump out of an airplane, I would probably be scared out of my mind. If I didn't black out, I would probably be screaming the entire way down, worried about getting eaten by sharks in the darkness. Not only did you guys have to deal with uncertainty of the timing of things, but now you throw somebody in there, Mike O'Connell, for example, who creates chaos in your plan. Was that, assuming that part of the story is accurate, now you have dead weight on the mission. How do you deal with it? Now you have to reposition, some of your strengths and how you guys approach stuff, given an outside influence like this before the mission really even started.
For something like that, so the guy that would be tandem jumping him in would be solely responsible for his well-being. So he's going to give him all the instructions on what to do, which is essentially, hopefully, he just blacks out and we can do our job, put him off the side, and he's not endangered anybody.
But in that, you have a couple 100 pounds of somebody tandem jumping with one of your SEALs. So now that SEAL now needs to redistribute his equipment to other SEALs.
Yeah, right? We'll do, like those tandem guys, we'll do hundreds and thousands of those jumps. So it's second nature to them.
But in going in, you guys are also going in with all your equipment, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was a great example. And I think that one of the things that we talk about is SEALs being ready to step up and have the teamwork in place to be able to support stuff like this. You guys do have an ethos behind what you do that gives a foundation to what the SEALs are. Can we spend a minute talking about that?
Sure.
So I put a slide up, and some of you may be familiar and have seen the SEAL ethos before. But Terry, here are a few key points that I took out of the ethos. It talks about being common citizens with an uncommon desire to succeed.
Yeah. And this is, yeah, so that piece is really critical to our mindset and kind of our humility coming in from as a SEAL team. So as I'm running part of our BUDS training pipeline, I get these new students coming in, and a lot of them are very cocky because they were, good athletes, Division I athletes. So we kind of have to put them back in their place of, hey, we are here for the nation. We volunteer to serve the nation and the people that can't do the job to protect themselves. So kind of building back onto the humility and teamwork of it, get the ego out the door, because the ego is what get people hurt.
Yep. But there's some great phrases in here that relate to teamwork. It's something that you have to earn every day. Yeah. The ability to control your emotions and your actions, never quitting. All these things feel like they would be important to any team, whether it's a SEAL team or a University of Michigan engineering team.
Absolutely. I mean, these are our ethos inside of SEAL teams, but they can overlay into anything. Just part of being a good person, a good teammate, a good friend. I know the struggles of college students these days, especially in the current situation. So having that team to rely on and keep each other kind of picked up and moving forward is critical.
And can we spend a minute talking about that process that gets the most team-focused people onto the SEALs? Because there is an extensive BUDS process that is not easy to get through, but what comes out at the end is an individual who is very focused on the team. Can you talk about how the SEALs get there?
Yeah, so our pipe, what we call our pipeline, is 63 weeks long. So a new student that wants to volunteer to be part of the program and try to become a SEAL, it starts with a first screening process. They'll do their ASVABs, their test scores. They'll do a physical fitness test, and then they'll interview with a SEAL and a coordinator somewhere around the country. Of all those 10,000 or so that want to be into the SEAL teams each year, we down select those. We'll take the best candidates from the interviews, test scores, physical scores, and award them a contract. So we do 1,200 contracts a year on, roughly. And those 1,200 will then go to boot camp. They'll get selected a few more times, and then they'll start the BUDS process. The BUDS process, again, 63 weeks. I ran the first 8 weeks. So we would take 200 students at a time, put them through an 8-week training course, focusing on giving them the very basics of mental toughness skills, get them physically and mentally fit for BUDS. Then I show up to BUDS, go through another screening test to get started. 5 weeks in, we'll do what we call our Hell Week, which is really just a selection of the mentally tough candidates. So we'll spend 4 or 5 weeks just physically running you into the ground. You'll be wet, you'll be sandy, you'll be tired. You'll eat enough to survive, but you're still going to be losing weight. You're never really going to fully recover at the end of the day. So at the end of Hell Week, once we start Hell Week, for those that don't know, it's 5 days, no sleep, just a constant grind with instructors yelling at you, carrying the boats around, carrying logs around. You're wet and sandy, you're cold, you're hungry, you're tired. And what that does is weeds out those those candidates that only think about themselves and are not focused on the bigger picture of the team success. Because the only way you're going to make it through Hell Week or any BUDS training is as a team.
And it sounds like at the end of this selection process, the team ends up with a group of individuals who makes everybody else better.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you'll learn through that 63-week grind is that everybody has a bad day. So my job as a teammate for my friends and those I work with is be ready to pick them up when they're having a bad day, because tomorrow could be my bad day and I need a hand. So that really instills that kind of teamwork of carrying your brother across the line when needed. Yep.
That's fantastic. And obviously leads to your success. Brian, can you talk a bit about how that mindset of teamwork comes into play with the Michigan engineering program?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of teamwork opportunities for students as they move through the program in the College of Engineering. There's all sorts of things. We integrate teamwork into our classes through projects that students work on, often working with people that they haven't worked with before. And that's a great learning experience because you have to learn how to adapt on the fly and to help each other. A lot of the things that you said, Terry, kind of resonate with that team experience. And I think that there's a lot that our students could learn from you and from the Navy SEALs approach to teamwork. We also have team projects all over the place that students get involved with. Our solar car team project is one example, but there's many, many more. We have teams working on developing exoskeletons, or teams working on developing software for local organizations or national organizations. And so it's one of those really critical skills that we're always trying to do more in when it comes to the education that we do at Michigan, inside the classroom and outside the classroom, because it's absolutely essential for students to be successful in their future careers. So we take that seriously in IOE, and I know in all of the departments in the College of Engineering.
Yep, that's great. Now, Paul, you've done a great job listening so far.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I want to get into a couple stories with Paul around teamwork. And before we do that, Paul, can you give us 30 seconds for people who are not familiar with what is the PGA Tour?
Yeah, well, the PGA Tour is it's an organization, a gathering of the best golfers in the world. Usually, each tournament on the PGA Tour is 156 players, and there's a qualification process to get through. It's definitely not what the guys that go through BUD/S is like, but this Q school is what they call it. They used to call it anyway. Is usually about 180 players start the week, 6-round qualification, and then the top 25 are handed a PGA Tour card. That's the way it's changed a little bit over the years, but that's the way I got out there on the PGA Tour. But I'm sure if you're not a golf fan, you know who Tiger Woods is, or have you heard of him? That he's the GOAT. And it's pretty cool. So him, and then there's a bunch of other guys, and just I say the worst PGA Tour player is still a pretty darn good player. You just don't know who he is.
And for people who are familiar with other sports, it'd be the equivalent of the NFL or the NBA for golf.
Correct.
Yep. So a couple interesting stories with Paul regarding teamwork. And as I mentioned, professional golf tends not to lend itself to teamwork as much as other areas. But I got a chance to play with Paul a while back, and I was incredibly fortunate to be invited onto the PGA Tour to play as an amateur. And Paul and I were paired together in this tournament. And it was on Saturday afternoon, and it was late in the day, and we walked off one of the holes, and Paul looked at the leaderboard. And in this tournament, Paul and I were paired together as a pro and as an amateur against 80 other teams. And you had to be in the top 12 teams after Saturday afternoon to make the cut as a pro and amateur to play on Sunday. And we walked off one of the greens, and Paul looked at the leaderboard. And Paul, I remember you said to me, "Hey, we're about 2 shots out and we have a few holes left." And you gave me a fist bump and you said, "Partner, let's go out and pick up these next 2 shots. And it's going to be my pleasure to play with you on the PGA Tour on a Sunday." And that was so inspiring to me, Paul. The whole thought concept was exciting. But to get confidence from your playing partner was fantastic. And we went out to the next hole, and the goal of the hole was to score a 4. The way the scoring worked out, I scored a 4 for a 3, and we picked up the one of the shots that we needed to get. Separately, Paul was playing as himself at the professional level against the 80 other touring pros. And on that hole, Paul, unfortunately, you got a 6 on the hole, and your score didn't help us as a team. And in general, it certainly wasn't helpful to your position as a professional golfer going into Sunday. And as that happened, I realized that, as a team, we had picked up a stroke. Paul, as an individual, had lost 2 strokes in a career that he's been pursuing for 24 years. And I decided, Paul, as soon as I saw that happen, as your partner, I said, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to let Paul collect his thoughts, give him 5 minutes to kind of refocus his mindset. I didn't take one step after I thought that. And do you remember what you did at that point?
Yeah, I came up to you and gave you a fist pump, said, way to carry the team, buddy. And let's go get one more.
And that was an amazing perspective. And how did that come to mind? Because typically, you play as an individual. So how was that your first reaction to come to me to encourage me as your teammate?
Well, as an individual sport player, golf, we really don't have a team. I have a caddy. Typically, that's my team. And so, but I love the team element. And so anytime I get an opportunity to play in a pro-am environment like we did there at Pebble Beach, it's fun for me. I love sports. I love competitive sports. And so I knew in that moment, after just kind of putting the charge on us that we needed to go get 2 shots, you did. You stepped up and you made your 4. And you got a shot on the hole, so 4 for 3. And unfortunately for me, stuff happens, and you don't always execute as though you visualize. And I made a really ugly looking double bogey, and it put me. It set me back a little bit. But I was excited for you, and I was excited for the next 3 holes that, hey, we have 3 more opportunities.
Yeah, no, that said a lot about your perspective. During that tournament, there was a second experience, Paul, that really stood out. And it had to do with the 8th hole. And you and I were playing at Pebble Beach. And Pebble Beach is one of the most beautiful golf courses probably on this entire planet. And the hole that we were playing had a layout with a tee box where you hit your first shot to a landing area. And then the goal is to hit your second shot from the safe landing area across the ocean to the green. And we were playing as a foursome. We had all hit our balls. And this is a pretty steep hill. So we didn't know where our balls landed when we hit them. But when we got to the landing area, there were 4 balls out there. And we were playing with Dickie Pride, who's a fantastic guy and a pleasure to play with. And your ball was right next to his. And then Rob's ball was a little bit off to the side. Unfortunately, I hit my ball way to the edge of the cliff. And there is a sign up there right next to my ball that said danger, steep cliff. And I was standing back, but I saw this sign. But what I really saw was this 40 or 50 foot massive cliff that my ball was right up against. And as I was standing back with you and Dickie and Rob, the main thoughts that were going through my mind were, I'm going to walk to the edge of the cliff and I'm going to be the first person to fall off a cliff and die on national TV on the PGA Tour and turn into shark food.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Terry, this is the second time I've turned into shark food in this discussion.
I know,
but
you got an infatuation with sharks. Is it Shark Week on Discovery this week?
But this was going through my mind. So Rob hit and Dickie hit, and I knew that I could not go up and hit this golf ball. And I knew that I had to tell Paul that. And I knew that I had to walk up to you, Paul, and say, I cannot hit this golf ball because I'm scared of falling off the cliff. Now, the only thing that's worse than telling one professional touring pro who's played in 400 tournaments that you can't hit a golf ball, given that Dickie was standing right next to you, is telling 2 professional golfers that you can't hit a golf ball. And I did. And that's exactly what I did, Paul. And I said to you, I can't hit this. And do you remember what you said to me?
Yeah. Well, first, this is my favorite hole in the world, and my favorite second shot. So every time I get an opportunity to hit a second shot here, I can't wait. And actually, where you hit it, I would love to hit it because that's as close as possible you can get to the green without being over the cliff. So it's the shortest shot you can ever get. And when you said I can't hit it, you had already mentioned a little bit of your fear of heights, but I did not grasp the severity of that, and I thought you were kidding. And then you pretty apparent, Mike, that you weren't kidding. And so I looked at the ball, and it was about 3 feet from the edge, right? So it wasn't like on the edge, but when you took your golf stance, the left foot was going to be about 1.5 feet from the edge of the cliff. And so I'm like, well, you're not going to fall off the cliff. I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I'll just stand. How about if I sit or stand right there between you and the cliff and just kind of make sure that you don't fall off? And you're like, not happening. I'm just going to drop it back here. So that's what I did.
But that was an unbelievable response. You offered to stand between me and the cliff to prevent me from falling off the cliff. And Terry, what's your take on that? I mean, this was the first thing that came from Paul. I mean, it's not, and Paul, you've played this hole how many times in your life?
A lot.
Have you ever had anybody hit a ball that close to the cliff? I mean, this is not a normal occurrence. So it's not like you're accustomed to that. So Terry, this was a very natural reaction from Paul. What's your take on it?
Like my first take is selflessness. So Paul's looking at it as well, here's the team. Here's what I got to do to support the team. So I'm going to put myself in this position of potentially a little bit of a hazard, but he wasn't thinking about that. He was thinking of you and your safety and your ability to finish the job over his, potential danger of being eaten by a shark.
And Terry, separate from that, there is a story of a SEAL from 2006 who was in Iraq.
Yeah, Mikey.
And he was on a rooftop, and a grenade was thrown into his group, and he jumped on the grenade and sacrificed his life for the group. Is that a logical story from your mindset of taking care of the team?
Absolutely. I mean, anytime we're going onto a mission or doing anything, we know it's inherently dangerous, right? That's what we signed up for. That's why we got to try it. That's why we do the training that we do and the complexity we do, because we know we're going to be faced with those situations. So we need to make immediate reactions, immediate decisions, and act on those decisions. So in Mikey's position, they're taking contact. They're getting ambushed by some Iraqis, and over the top of the wall comes a grenade. So his initial reaction is, I've got to save my guys. So he dives on it because he knows he doesn't have time to grab it and try to throw it. So I don't think, I can't speak for Mikey now, but I don't think that his, the threat to him even crossed his mind. It was save my friends.
So it wasn't unique. And if I could ask you, would you have done the exact same thing?
Yeah, I think I would. I wouldn't even probably think about it. It would just be muscle memory reaction, just going for it. I mean, there's stories of Marines doing the same thing. It's just when you have that love of your team and that higher purpose of protecting your country and your teammates first, it just comes to you.
And I think this is amazing because Brian said in the introduction that the two of you come from seemingly much different careers or perspectives. But at the end of the day, Paul's reaction, I think, was very similar to what most SEALs' reactions would be in support of their teams. And I think and I think, it says that the two of you have a lot in common with each other.
Yeah, except I probably wouldn't let you drop your ball. I would have made you swing at it.
Well, so I didn't tell you, the ending of the story was that I did drop my ball. I took a penalty stroke, and then I hit my ball right into the Pacific Ocean. So Terry, from a mental toughness standpoint, let's start moving into our next section. How impressed are you with my mental toughness in that situation?
I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, you were about a 1.
At least I registered. Okay,
yeah,
fair enough. Yeah. And let's get into this mental toughness section. We probably only have, give or take, about 15 minutes left at this point. But Paul, if we could go back to you for a second, playing golf on national TV, where every single swing of the club counts, could be a stressful situation. Can you tell us a bit about the first time you went to Augusta and you played in the Masters and you walked up to that first tee box? Mentally, what were you thinking to keep yourself strong and to perform at that moment?
Well, all I could do was try to focus on where I wanted this ball to go. That was as plain and simple as that, because I was nervous, and it wasn't necessarily when I was on the tee. It was the 2 days leading up to my first tee time. I'd watch that tournament as a kid every spring, and it was my favorite to watch. And here I was going to be on that tee. And so, you know, the number one thing that I've always tried to focus on is, you know, how I'm going to be distracted during the day. The 5 hours we're out there, we're going to be distracted. And so the fact that it's the Masters, it's the first tee, there's 10,000 people falling around the tee box. It's on national TV. All the things that are out there, that the peripheral that are going through my mind, I've got to try to push back. And so I think the great players, the great athletes, the great, I don't care what field you're in, you have the ability to push back distraction and focus on what I want. And that's it. If I could focus on what I want to do, what I want this golf ball to do, then I'm no longer thinking of the things in my peripheral vision. And so, yeah, was I nervous? Sure. I was nervous walking up there, and all I could do though is look ahead. I got to keep this thing left of the right bunker. I'm looking at a tree, something to aim at in the distance. And I went and I trusted my stuff.
In years of experience, and Terry, if we can get to, I think Paul brought up two really good points, and maybe the first one is dealing with stress. And you have a terrific graph in the way that you guys think about trusting your skills in a stressful situation. Can you give us a perspective on this?
Yeah, so I kind of use this graph when I'm explaining training over time and dealing with stress within your ability. So as we're training our buds candidates, and even training, you know, once you get into SEAL teams, we try to keep the training in a sweet spot. So if you see kind of the graph, you know, experience over time, that's your ability to deal with stress. And then on the left is what's being asked of you. So it's either the stressful event like Hell Week, or jumping out of an airplane at 30,000 feet with a couple hundred pounds of stuff strapped on you, or a person strapped on you. And we try to keep that in a sweet spot. And what I mean by the sweet spot is, if you see that red, if I try to put you in a training position that you're not ready for because of your experience level, you're not going to succeed. Right. So if you don't succeed over time, now you're not in the program anymore. So we're losing candidates. So what we try to do is keep them kind of on that XY axis of enough stress to learn, but not too much stress to where we can, where we're going to put you out of your element and we're going to fail and have to start all over again. And then the same thing, if I don't have enough stress in that training exercise, you're not going to learn because you're not going to take it seriously. So that's kind of why I have that graph when I'm explaining kind of training over time with the appropriate amount of stress or requirements driven stress for our candidates.
And I think one of the things that probably comes into play driving stress or negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. And Paul, can you tell me your approach to clearing your mind of negative thoughts and what you go through to not allow that to happen when you need to perform?
Yeah, well, most golfers will carry what's called a yardage book, right? So it's a little booklet that, you know, it has the first hole, it has all the information we need to, you know, how far it is to the hazards in front of us, so that we can have a game plan of where we want the golf ball to go, right? And so that book for me, you know, if I just made a double bogey on 14 at Pebble Beach, I write the score down, I turn the page to number 15, and now I've got new info and new intel. And so now I'm trying to go through this book, and the more I can focus on this shot, then I'm no longer focused on that. So for me, it's all about this thing right here. I got to remain focused on what I want. That's all about the process and not what's behind me or what's ahead of this hole, just this shot. And the more I can do that, Mike, I mean, that's the whole deal. I'm responsible. I have nobody else telling me to do it. But the more I can dial into this shot right in front of me, I'm not thinking about anything else.
And it sounds like what you're saying is being in the moment, right? If you're not thinking about the past, you're not thinking about the future, you are being in the moment.
100%.
So Terry, how does a lack of emotion help somebody be more in the moment, right? Because if you're very emotional about something, it's probably really hard to be in the moment. Can you link those two things?
Yeah, to put it the easiest way I can explain it is emotions are distracting from what's going on. So the more I'm mad at something or upset about something or dealing with stuff that doesn't really matter, the more it distracts me from what's going on. So the quicker you can get rid of your emotion from making a decision or making an action, the better off you're going to be.
And is that something that's also practiced? Because it seems that it's a human nature to be emotional. It's maybe human nature to be negative with your thoughts. It's sometimes maybe it's human nature to feel like you're the victim. Over time, can you get better? Maybe that goes back to your graph and training. Maybe we just went back to where we were 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's definitely something you can train out of it and then put it in perspective when something happens. So what I'll tell either my athletes that I'm training or the candidates is basically water under the bridge. So if I'm standing on a bridge watching the water flow underneath me, I can only affect the water that's straight in front of me. If it's farther upstream, it doesn't really matter right now. I don't really care what's going on upstream. I can only affect what happens to me. And once that water flows underneath me, I can't touch it anymore. It's gone. So the more I worry about that, the less I'm going to be able to focus on what's coming. So for the water in the bridge thing, I'm going to learn from it, figure out what's going on, put that in my memory bank, and then move forward. Not worry about it, not stress about it.
And in part of not stressing about stuff, Paul, you've played in 400 PGA Tour events. You have not been successful in every event, however you define success. You haven't been successful in every round or on every shot. Failure is a part of what it takes to be great. What's been your perspective on failing?
Well, you're right. As a golfer, I've played in over 400 events. I've won twice. So that's a lot of failure if the ultimate is winning. I understand that in order to win, in order to be successful, it's each moment. You got to capture each moment and go, and you stack those on top of each other. And hopefully at the end of the week, you've won. But it's inherent. Like I hit a ball for a living, right? Terry, a little more intense. So, if I didn't have a good week, I wouldn't get paid, but then I'd go play next week, and maybe I had a better week next week. So it is the bottom line is I've got to stay in this shot, and for me to dwell on the past or dread the future, I've got to stay right here, Mike, and that's it. There's really the only responsibility, and as an individual athlete, I've got to hold myself accountable to those thoughts.
And this is a great mindset to talk about, because it's not probably just when you're on tour, or Terry, when you're out on a mission. I think this is a mindset that we could all use every day in our lives, and it's applicable to a lot of things. Terry, one of the things that you had mentioned just a minute ago was learning from your failures. You guys have something that's called an after action report. Can you talk about the learning process and how that works?
Yeah. So everything we do, whether it's a training mission, training exercise, or a full blown direct action mission overseas, we will do what we call an after action report. So what that after action report does, as soon as that mission's over, we sit down, we drop our gear, and we start discussing what happened. So we'll start with the planning phase. What went well? What did we mess up? Go into the actions on the objective. What went well? What did we mess up? Is there intel that we missed that we weren't paying attention to that was presented to us? And then what did we gather off the target to learn for the next one? And that is a time for everybody to drop their egos. So we walk in from this very senior ranking man to the guy that's on his very first training exercise. Everybody has equal vote in what's going on and an equal voice in how we're discussing it. So that is critical to our learning process, to take perspective from a guy that's been doing it for 30 years and a guy that's been doing it for 5 years, weight those equally, and then everybody listens and learns from that. And then once that's done, we put that into a piece of paper or an email, and we catalog it for the next time. And then we send that back to our teams that are back stateside, so they can stay ahead of the curve and stay ahead of the enemy when we're doing our processes.
And as we talk about, learning from stuff, I think that as you move up your graph that you gave us and you learn and you're more capable to do certain things, maybe this is more, I'll go to Paul first on this. How do you set goals? Because I assume that both of you in the success that you've had in your careers are goal oriented. What's been your approach to setting your goals and then moving forward?
Early on, I really didn't set many goals when I was a younger player. It was more, I just wanted to do what those guys did that I saw on TV. It was, I played golf. There again, it's a sport. It's a whole different deal. And I loved to play golf. I had a little bit of talent. And I'm like, I want to do what those guys do. And so I just worked really hard in how I knew to practice and to train. And, I was fortunate enough to get there. As I got older, I definitely had some things that I really wanted to do. And it was as simple as writing them down. I would write some goals down, objectives, and then I just went back to my training because I can't sit there while I'm playing a round of golf thinking about winning the tournament when I'm on the first hole on Thursday. I've got to focus on where I want this ball to go. So it even though it sounds very boring, that's ultimately the only way I can keep a clear mind and focus on each little moment as they come. Because if I don't do that well early in the week, I'm not going to get to my ultimate goal.
So it sounds like your overall goals were broken down into very much micro goals that you had to execute in attention to detail.
Yeah, the word that about 2009 is when the word process came into my head, that there's a process to everything I'm doing. And if I just stick to my process, then I'm going to be more successful. It doesn't mean I'm going to win. Remember, I only won twice, and that was even before that. Even though I had this winning mindset, my skills were diminishing. But as far as I became really process oriented to where it was literally a moment by moment, because I can't get there unless I start here.
Yep. And Terry, can you talk about either bigger goals, micro goals, attention to detail, and how that comes into play?
Yeah, I think it's critical in how we do things, because every mission we do, we can break it down into goals. So just like a hostage rescue, I'm going to break it into, hey, the first 4 hours we're going to do this. Once we get on an airplane, we got to do this, and moving on. So same thing through buds. Like as a kid walks into Hell Week, his first goal should be making it through that first night, because it's going to be chaotic. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be a lot of noise going on, people yelling at you. So if I can make the hour by hour through that first night, then it gets easier. So that's how we break everything into what we call kind of for our goal setting, a process goal and an outcome goal. So our process goal is going to be focused on how we do things. So how do I shoot a gun? How do I jump out of an airplane? All the way down to, the essential skills and the things that I can control and I can do. And then our outcome goal would be the milestones. So I've got, hey, Hell Week, day one, get through the first night, get to Wednesday. Once I make it to Wednesday, they're not going to kick me out of here as long as I physically don't get hurt. So those are outcome goals, and our process goals is how we segment our goal setting for our kids.
And if we go back to the Hell Week experience, that you had said that you're awake essentially for 5 straight nights, and the physical activity is very intense. I think I've read somewhere that over the course of those several days, that a candidate going through Hell Week will run over 200 miles.
Yeah.
And each day it's 6 miles to and from getting their meals. If they were to go into, we'll use Hell Week for an example, thinking that their goal is to get to Friday and think of it from that high of a level, is that an example of a time in life where that's not a manageable goal, that you have to step back? And maybe at times, did you ever get to the point where you just had to survive the next 15 seconds of Hell Week?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that was your goal?
Yeah, absolutely. And if one of the analogies I use is eating an elephant, right? You can't eat an elephant on one bite. You got to take off little bites at a time. So if making it to Friday afternoon of Hell Week is that elephant, I've got to start by taking a bite. And that bite is the first breakout session for the first 10 minutes of the chaos with the grenades and the M60s and the smoke and everything going on is that first bite. Then I take another bite, then I take another bite. And eventually I get to the point where I'm in control of what's going on, even though I'm not physically in control from the aspect of the training scenario, but I'm in control of my emotions. I'm in control of what happens. And I can process that out to, hey, in 4 hours, we're going to eat. So in 2 hours, I know we're going to take a break. In 1 hour, I'm going to get a water break, and I can break that all the way down to what I'm doing.
Yep. And there are a couple SEAL phrases that I'd like to get your take on that I think are important, obviously, to the SEALs, but they can apply to all of us in our lives every day. One phrase, which is one of my favorite, is the only easy day was yesterday. What does that mean?
It's classic. So what it is that mindset of every single day is a new challenge. And the only easy day I've had was yesterday. So yesterday's water in the bridge is done. Check it off. My ability to suck it up, it went up another notch. And now I'm ready for the next day. So knowing walking into the day that it's going to be harder than the last day is that mindset of progressing up, like that graph I was telling you about. As we progress up, the only easy stuff we've ever done is behind us. So everything's a new challenge, new mindset. Be ready for that challenge and focus your mind to being ready to do that next challenge and not worry about what happened in the past.
Yeah. And as far as getting to that next challenge, and Paul, you have a different challenge every week. As you approach that new challenge, not only with a positive mindset to succeed, how do you use visualization? Because in my conversations with both of you guys, I've heard this word come up quite a bit. Paul, how does it impact your approach to stuff?
Well, I think it's huge. It is a part of my that whole process that I talked about, and so for me to see a shot, the first hole at Augusta there in 1996. Oh my gosh, I just aged myself. But yeah, all I could think about was, okay, I saw the shot, I saw where I wanted the ball to land, I saw the trajectory it was going to start on, and the shape it was going to move, and like I say, so I had to visualize me hitting that shot, and then it's go time. I got to go hit it. And a part of my later on in life learning, I also learned to kind of re-emphasize what I wanted to do. Or so after I hit the shot, whether it was what I envisioned the first time or not, I would see it again. Visualize myself doing it right and seeing the ball fall right in the middle of the fairway. And so it just kind of, to me, it's all about the mindset. And the more I can see success, the easier it is to duplicate it.
Yeah, Terry, how about you? How did visualization come into play in your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Paul, it's critical. So what we're trying to do with our visualization, especially me, if I'm going to skydive out of an airplane at 30,000 feet with all of my kit and my oxygen mask, my night vision device, I'm going to do that jump in my mind 1,000 times before I can get on an airplane. So what I'm trying to force my mind into is walking through that process, walking through that jump, physically reacting to all those emotions of the negative 30-degree air hit me in the face, 120-mile-an-hour hit me in the face. Can't see what's going on. I can't see where anybody else is at. And what if something happens? So if my ripcord's floating, if I can't reach something, if my bag's out of place and now I'm in a spin, I'm going to do all of those every single time in my mind, go through every single scenario that I could possibly dream up that would go wrong to where I can save my own life, and practice those in my head. So when I do jump out of the airplane, I've already done it. It's no big deal. I'm not stressed out about it, even though I hate doing it. I'm not going to be thinking about all the stuff that can go wrong. I'm going to be thinking about, okay, I'm diving out. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go down to 5,000 feet. I'm going to pull, I'm going to do whatever. And if something happens, I'm going to react to it because I've done it 1,000 times.
Yeah. I hear consistent things between the two of you. You visualize success and you're prepared for whatever uncertainty comes from that. Before we get to final thoughts here, Terry, another question for you. My second favorite SEAL phrase is earn your Trident every day.
Yes.
What does that mean? So
to me, that means the responsibility of that Trident. So for those of you not familiar with the Trident, that's our insignia that we wear in our chest, on our uniforms. It is what signifies you as a SEAL in your uniform. But more importantly, that signifies that is my way of life. So that the weight of that Trident, because it is heavy physically, but the weight of responsibility on that Trident to protect my nation, protect my teammates, and then do my job as best I can every single day is a huge responsibility into the lifestyle of what it is to be a SEAL. But not just be a SEAL, but be a member of the military, my position in the military, my position as a family man. And it's the weight of the the weight of the responsibility is what I have to physically and mentally earn every single day.
I love it. It's a great perspective. And I think that's a great way for us to move to closing this before we get to question and answers. And before that, we do that, Paul, do you have any final thoughts or takeaways that you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I'm loving listening to you, Terry, and it reemphasizes though that what I worked on for all those years is right. I love hearing other people talk about what it takes, and I think you have one of the coolest jobs on the planet, and I hit a ball, so I think you win there. But but the bottom line is, for all you viewers and listeners out there, it's really all about right now, and wherever you're at, be 100% there. Focus on what you're doing, and you'll keep getting better.
Terry, how about you? Any final thoughts before Q&A?
Yeah, and he had a good one now with that. But I would tell everybody, kind of keep a short-term memory. So if you struggle with something or have a failure on something, don't let it bother you too long. Kind of quickly forget about it, move on to the next process or next test or whatever it's going to be. And also kind of, as Mr. Brian talked about for a little bit, trying to find your team to help you through those situations, whether it's studying for a midterm, practicing for a test, or whatever it's going to be. Because we have a saying in the Navy that, a rising tide raises all ships. So if your team is all working well together, everybody's going to succeed. I know you're going to be competitive, trying to, get the best grades, but the more you can help each other out, the better off everybody's going to be.
That's great. And I have a takeaway in listening to you guys talk. And I think oftentimes it's not only at my stage in my career, but it could be anybody at any stage, but certainly it was me at 20 years old, that at that age, I thought a lot about what I wanted to do. And I wanted to succeed in my engineering classes. I then wanted to get the right job. I then wanted to go to a top-ranked business school. I then wanted to get into management consulting. And I had a set of goals that revolved around what I wanted to do. In hearing you guys talk today, I think that there's probably a more important question that my takeaway is to ask who I want to be. And I hear you guys talk about the winning mindset, being a great team player, having mental toughness. If you answer that question for me, who you want to be, and it includes those things, I think that then sets anybody up for a set of goals or a path and the success that you guys have had in life. I think you guys have had the success in life because of who you were as people that allowed you to go do those things. I don't think you guys necessarily had that success because you guys just happened to set some goals. Well, Paul didn't set any goals, I guess. But to set goals to be like, I just want to wake up and be the greatest golfer in the world. Like that's not the path. I think in listening to you guys, it's who you are as a person that then sets the foundation to allow you to go out and do those other things. So with that, and why don't we wrap up this part of it? Brian, I know that quite a few questions have come in. Do you want to step in and do some Q&A?
Yeah, I would love to do that. First, I want to thank all of you. This has been incredible. So many great messages for our students and staff and faculty that are attending here. Thank you for being so generous with your valuable time and your expertise.